Hi there. In 2010 I moved back from France to England, in fact back to Lincolnshire, the coast just above Mablethorpe. This film will tell and show the story of the next 3 years or so in setting up the new gardens and grounds and the art galleries. Several major things have to be taken into account immediately. Costs, lack of funds, doing things on a shoestring budget, what has actually been created within the gardens already and working around those, and the fact that I have some disabilities, so I have a job doing a lot of physical work myself, and in this case I had a lot of help from either friends that I've paid or neighbours, and also my stepson Patrick, who's done a lot of work and learnt a lot about gardening himself whilst doing this. As so much has happened over this time, I'm playing quite a lot of this a little bit speeded up. And you can see we've already set up the fish ponds, we've dug out with the JCB the old marshland that was on the land, so we didn't have to have planning permission. We've put butyl liners into those ponds, we've stocked the fish ponds up, designed and created the shape of the garden, new raised beds, flower gardens, paving with bricks, herb gardens, and even the foundations ready for a greenhouse. Behind these fence panels was an ideal space for my new art gallery, so I had a wooden building constructed there. In France I had a huge hall which used to be an ex-dance hall, and this is much smaller, so it's rather cramped, but it's better than nothing. Rather than have a ponytunnel built which wouldn't last as long, I decided to have a second-hand greenhouse erected. Again, we had to keep costs down, and we had to use reclaimed materials. In this case, Parson used breeze blocks and some old curbstones to build the foundations. Then I had to build the frames to go within the greenhouse and design the whole interior layout. In the meantime, the perennials in the main flower beds were getting established, as were the herb gardens. The smaller fish ponds and wildlife ponds were also doing very well and had become fairly well established. I cheated a bit by taking plants from the marshland when we had it dug out for the main pond and plonked those immediately into those ponds, so we had instant growth. Plenty of manure added to the raised beds, and we had very good vegetable crops almost from the start, even entered the local vegetable show and gained some prizes in that. Wild produce was also fairly abundant, with sloes and wild gooseberries and cherries and so on in the hedgerows, and our own cherries in the garden that were already established did very well. We started making experimental wine with them. The menagerie of animals began to grow. Our chickens expanded to a black and white cat, and then we had a white cat come, then we had Lottie the Labrador come, and in 2012, just before Christmas, we were joined by my little Labrador pup, Holly. I'm sure you'll be surprised and delighted in this film to see just how things did expand and continue and grow and mature. That pond now is full of rushes and reeds and lilies. The gardens produce an excess and help to fill the freezers. But one of the main purposes for the gardens wasn't just to produce for the table, it was also for me as an artist. They are artist gardens, and I've opened these to the public free of charge all through summer to come and enjoy, picnic, and also to take part and paint. Wildlife areas were deliberately created within the garden. Areas were left for meadow grass, and also the plants, of course, were very attractive to many insects and butterflies. When leaving wildlife areas, it's also important to leave some areas of thistle and brambles and stinging nettles as well in places. Take some working out so you don't get them in the wrong places. As you see here, these goldfinches loved the thistles. At last the basic structure of the greenhouse was almost finished, and I was getting plants into it before the final glass and walls were even done. Although I'm trying to keep the perennials in almost the same places, many of the annuals, like the sunflowers, change very much each year, and the gardens are always slightly different. The artichokes, both Jerusalem and globe, are very useful because they're very decorative as well as being functional and garden vegetables. So I mix and blend flowers with the vegetables as well. Nature seems to waste nothing, and the swallows and swifts were soon using the pond, as well as were the sand martins and house martins of the area. Plus they were picking up the grass and lawn mowings to make their nests with, and the mud from the side of the ponds. This was the first year, 2010, and now, coming to 2012, I'm just having to replace all of these boards, and Patrick has laid these cement blocks that we bought second hand all the way around. We're going to put fresh gravel down. It's also given time for the soil to mature more and to get more of the manure into it. At the very beginning of this film you saw a huge tree being dragged out, or a stump of a tree. A slice off that is what I carved the sign for Curlew Cottage from. And here are my plans as things have developed. This year in my art I decided to paint a lot more about the figure in the gardens and the figure in flowers, and Rosie very kindly modelled her new dresses for me. I would love to have had an established garden with the trees and the flowers already there, and just to work around that framework. Here I'm just working within a complete field where there was virtually nothing when we started. But things are gradually establishing now, and even the daffodils are doubling up and growing over the years. You have all sorts of wildlife coming in and using the facilities. These Canada geese just dropped in for a quick daytime visit. We've had ornamental ducks and some very strange wading birds coming in, including curlews and woodcock. The frogs and toads have gone absolutely bananas since we made the ponds, and in fact I had one very nice koi carp killed by the toads that wrapped themselves around it and smothered it. The little waterfall area in the corner provides a nice little stream that provides fresh water filtered down to this small pool inside the greenhouse. I got an old pallet and put plastic containers underneath it, and then built that as a floating island raft, put turf on top, and plants started to grow, and the ducks now use that for a sanctuary. So into our second year, getting fantastic crops of marigolds, and the lupin's doing well now as well, and the delphiniums making their way. In the greenhouse we had the usual crops of tomatoes and cucumbers and so on, but you also see there we were doing well with the melons, 3 different types. The meadowland and wildlife areas that we made, leaving the grass for cutting later, also provided us with straw for the chickens. Somehow fresh organic crops are always lovely, aren't they, and seem to taste better than the brought ones, especially when they come from your own garden. Last year I did enter some of the crops for the local village hall fete and garden festival, and I won some prizes there, as you can see, which was very pleasing. This last year I didn't enter, but may next year. Because my arthritis has got so much worse, I've had to give up pottery, so the studio I built has now been turned back into just painting. At this time the rushes were just becoming established, but by 2012 I had to cut them right back and even spray some of them because they were starting to take over and creep over the pond. So management has to be going on all of the time. We got several gallons of cider from doing this, and it took over a year for it to really ferment properly, but now, a year and a half old, it is absolutely perfect. Because the greenhouse isn't heated in winter, we have to bring all of the plants into the conservatory, which is a bit of work, and I have to get Patrick's help and some other lads to do this. But it also makes the conservatory quite fun during winter and keeps some sort of greenery and life there, and I continue my painting as well from photographs from the summer. And so the lovely colours of autumn come, and surrounding fields are filled with the golden corn and the crops that are being harvested. Everything has either been taken from the beds or has been harvested, and the beds can be dug over, late manure put in, and then stuff starts to die off as the first frost come in the greenhouse, and we can prepare the greenhouse ready for next spring. replanted the spring onions from last year and spread them out a bit, put some new seeds in soon. Next I want to move the leaf beet from the far side across to this middle one, so we get 2 lines of nice perpetual spinach. Now the work begins. There's still a bit of rubbish left over from last winter, but the beds are basically prepared. In fact, in 2012 even more so, because we had to replace all of these old rotten wooden frames with the new concrete blocks. And it's the same outside as well, and in 2012 some of those boards need replacing too, it seems. They last about 3 years, which isn't as long as I'd hoped. Spring is well on the way now, everything's thawed out, and it won't be long before both frogs and toads are there singing away. Well, spring is virtually here, so now we're going to move all of these plants that have been stored over winter in the conservatory out. There's some slight frosts about, but I don't think it's going to concern us that they're going to be hard enough in the greenhouse now. It's a couple of weeks into March. That's the way. You manage? Well, here we are at the beginning of a new spring, and we're just coming into March. So it's a bit early yet, but we'll start planting up something in the greenhouse. And one of my friends, Claire, who has enjoyed the past videos I've made here in the garden so much, has asked me if I would do something in a little more detail, just showing you how I do it in my way. I said, well, I'm no great gardener. I just fly by the seat of my pants as an artist. I just plant by what I've seen by my parents, by other people, the effects I want to get. A lot of it is sort of intuitive. But no, she said she thoroughly enjoys it, and she has friends that do as well. So what I do, I film in a little more detail, showing how I go through the season. So let's start now with preparing the gardens and what we're doing. I'll show you a little bit of what we've done over the last 2 years in developing just the field here and building all of this so far, making the new greenhouse, the ponds, the beds, everything. And over winter, as you see, we've prepared the old beds with lots of more horse manure and so on, and we're virtually ready for planting up. I've now just been putting together my seed trays and boxes here, preparing all of the beds for the new plants for the coming season. It is early yet, but it won't be long before our strawberries here are growing up. And you can see we've got some cyclamen even over winter. It's preparing to flower for early season. So it's time now to be putting in some early tomatoes and some of the earlier seeds just to get them going. We're almost frost-free now, hopefully. Fingers crossed I'm frost-free, certainly in the greenhouse, because that won't do anything I'm bringing out any good. I brought some of my pepper plants out. I hope they'll be warm enough out here now. I might have to grow obviously some more this year, but I'm not bringing out the subtropical plants too much yet. But let's have a look at how we're going to plant up. John Innes seed compost, the sowing compost, because it's got a good mixture of soil and peat with it. I do like a nice soil-based compost. The peat ones are alright for being cheap and for grow bags and things, but not for planting up in seeds. And you see what I'm doing here is I've taken these little paper pots and filled them with that, because the beauty of these is that they rot down in the soil afterwards. So I can plant up my seedlings into these and plant the whole things as they rot away into the ground and not disturb the root structures at all, which gives the plants, I think, a much stronger start. Then I've got my other little seed trays where I can just put the same sort of stuff into it, and the roots, being fairly small, the roots will hold all of that together. You can see some leeks left over from last year, which I can plant out later there. And for the larger plants I have larger pots, and I tend to put pots into trays like this so that I can grow on larger seedlings such as marrows, cucumbers and melons. And then I've got individual plants again which I can just tap out gently and plant into my main garden. We're going to start with the earliest of the seeds, and I think that'll be tomato and so on. Because I have mobility difficulties, the raised beds are very, very useful to me, even with these out jogging up and down, but it does mean that I haven't got to reach quite so far, and everything is within easy reach. I can just bend slightly and reach it with longer handled tools and so on. Here we've got a lovely amaryllis to go in. It's already started to sprout indoors, which is a bit rough. Well, these lilies that I found I've been putting in the greenhouse grow to huge proportions because it's so much warmer in here. So I place them fairly carefully as to where I want them. And got lots of new manure into this winter. Get it down fairly deep. And I'm just showing. So I'm planting subtropical plants in the greenhouse amongst vegetables and ordinary English standard ones. You get a lovely mixture of variety and lushness that way. What I also tend to do is to save seeds from the previous year's flowers. And I've got huge bucketfuls out in my shed. Here we've got some lupins, and I'm simply going to, I've dried them out, I'm simply going to break down the shells now and set the lupin seeds in the surface of this seeding compost. And once they're all out and spread, I can move them around a bit and prick them out once they start to grow. And we'll get some wonderful new colours, mixtures of lupins here. Take out the old ones. Even where I'm throwing these old husks will be fine, because there may be one or two seeds amongst them, and it'll be surprising what just, I remember where they go, it'll be surprising what just may grow up accidentally amongst my other beds, because I don't mind accidental growth, a few flowers here and there, which are rather exciting amongst my vegetables and things. I'm an artist, I want things to look attractive, I want spontaneity and colour, and although I can place things just as I want them exactly and geometrically, it's nice to have accidental things happening amongst the garden as well, which was like having somebody else, another gardener, come in to give you ideas, which is why I'm showing you this, because it might just be of interest to you with the ideas that I've got. Something just might strike a chord that you haven't thought about, or however much of an expert you are, and I'm certainly not. There we go. So I know there's some odd seeds amongst those. I'm going to throw those to the back there, in a little corner which won't be used much for anything. And if a few little lupins come up there, that'll make a lovely little covering in that corner. There we go. Now let's spread them out a bit. I could put each of these into one little pot on its own, but in this case, no, I'm just going to have some fun and let these all sprout together here and then pull them apart when they've grown a bit, because they're pretty hardy little plants, the lupins. Little sprinkling of soil over those just to get them covered. Only a fraction, doesn't take a lot, don't leave them very deep. There we are, so that's a little tray of our previous year's lupins saved and planted up. Normally I don't use plastic bags because they tend to make things rot. I'll use paper envelopes to keep my seeds in. Now I've got two varieties of cucumber here, one a smooth one and one a slightly rougher surfaced. I tend to hedge my bets a bit with the cucumbers and some of the other plants. I plant them into trays, but I also always plant just a few seeds directly into where I'm going to want them to grow in the beds themselves. We get a much stronger plant that way. If they actually take that way and really get going, they're in the same greenhouse. Because the roots aren't going to be disturbed, they often come up much better. So I'm hedging my bets both ways. I will plant 2 or 3 seeds of these into a container and then split those out. And I will plant some actually into the beds themselves where I'm going to want them later. So in this case, we shan't plant them all at once. Just simply take our cucumber seeds, get my fingers in them, there we go, and keep them in the same container. I just put 1, 2, 3 into a pot, just push them in, cover them over, and that's as simple as it requires. Now in case, because I'm very early this year, in case I'm too early, I will keep some in the packet dry for later, and I might plant a second little sowing if these don't show well in a few weeks' time. So now I'm going to want to put some where they actually belong, down here in the bed, and I'll just do the same. They're going to go at the back here. I'll just put a couple, just drop a couple in. I don't want them back there. And the same again here with the other variety. 1, 2, 3. Just push them in. They'll grow all right, you'll see. In fact, I'm only going to put 2 into these little containers because these are smaller pots and I haven't got quite as much space, but they'll certainly do for what I want. Yes. I don't grow many courgettes. I tend to let them grow into marrows. I prefer nice big marrows, and we stuff them with spicy mince. But 2 of these to a smaller pot or 3 to a larger pot. Again, that's all we need to do. So 1, 2, 1, 2. No, they'll grow nicely in there. Plenty of room for the roots. And I've also got my own seeds from previous crops as well, which I can bring out. I've got butternut squash to plant and all sorts from the past here. Be careful where they drop. They'll be growing in between. Central bed, I tend to just sprinkle mixed salads all over it. And what I've done is just sprayed and just feathered salad seeds all over this bed in the same way as I should do with a bit of rocket here, and that way, if I do this throughout the season, once they're watered in, you can see my spraying system here. I just move it around. I have one for one end, one for the other. Just turn them on for 10 minutes at a time, a couple of times a week, and it sprays the whole of the greenhouse without my having too much work to do, because I can't be carrying big amounts of water about. And then we get a constant lot of salad through the season, which we can just crop off. In fact, these little seedlings here are some that were planted a couple of weeks ago and are already coming. As I was saying, we do save our own seeds and usually keep them in packets like this. So here we have some butternut squash from our previous year's crops, and we've harvested them and eaten them. We've held back the seeds And now I can start planting a few of these up this year. They're okay unless they're hybrids, then you've got problems, but straightforward plant seeds usually grow pretty well. So there we go on that. Shouldn't need too many squash plants, but I like them outside as well. And then just push those in. I say they keep better, the seeds, in paper envelopes like this because they're drier. Plastic is not a good idea because it gets damp and the seeds go mouldy. So very quick and simple planting. I haven't got the energy to be doing something too complicated. Mine's got to be an easy way of gardening. We hope that the temperatures in the greenhouse are going to be warm enough to get these plants started off. Otherwise the seeds are just going to rot off and that's not good. It's a little bit the same with my peppers. We've got sweet and hot here. We're going to plant those into these little paper containers, 2 or 3 to a container, and then split them out later. And I shall plant a few directly into the ground as well. I'm planting all of my sweet peppers together. There's 2 varieties going on here. And I'll plant all my hot spicy peppers together in another tray so I don't get those mixed up. Just put the seed packets there so I remember what they are. What to do now on this first planting is my 3 sorts of cabbage, some sprouts and 4 sorts of tomato to do. We're going to have a mixture of different sorts of cherry tomatoes and some larger ones here, the Rio Grande and so on, for cooking purposes rather than salads. So I've planted all my seeds, what goes and happens, but here comes the snow again, which in March is not unusual. I know in France we used to get worse weather at the end of March than we did throughout winter often, and then suddenly in April it'll get better, but I don't mind the snow because it's still going to be fairly warm inside the greenhouse. Another thing I like to do is to label all my seed trays because after a short while of watering the old labels, the old packets from the seeds will disintegrate, so it's better to use a waterproof pen and some proper little markers like these, decent size, and they're totally waterproof and they will last sometimes several seasons over. We have to start putting the strings up for the vines and tomatoes and so on as well. And what I tend to use now is this braided nylon. The ordinary garden plastic string is useless, absolutely a waste of space. After a few weeks the UV light from the sun and so on makes it rot down and very brittle, and halfway through the season the stuff will break and all your plants come falling down. You've got to retie it all. So it's worth investing just a little bit more in big reels of braided nylon. Go onto eBay, get a couple of 100 metres of this fine braided nylon, and that will last for absolutely ages. And I've put up these wires, as you can see high up here. I have a job to get up doing this, but and then these wires will take my main runners down, the stringers down. And all I do is tie over, make a loop further down. Don't have to reach too high. Do a double slip. Like that. And then simply pull that back up, tighten up, get my knife out. And in my case, I always carry a pen knife on me for garden work and wood carving and so on. Have it tied to me. It's not a weapon, it's a tool, so I don't lose it, because if you leave these things about in the greenhouse or the garden, that's it, they just tend to disappear, don't they? So I have it tied to my belt. So measure down, and then just cut off. That's fine. If you want to, you could seal the end off with a flame, just to stop it from fraying, but that'll be fine. You can see the lines of cords now, all set up, ready for the young plants to come up and be tied up and gradually grow up them. Both the nectarine and the peach blossom are now coming into full swing, and it's only early March, so I need to, there's no insects in here, I need to get a brush and just go and cross-pollinate these. And being an artist, I reckon a nylon long-handled number 10 will do the job. Let's see what happens. See, the petals are just starting to fall already, so we don't have very long. Let's hope that this will help to give us a few fruit on this plant this year. It may not. But certainly there's no insects about whatsoever at the moment. We can see what survived over the winter now. The basics, the buds are just starting to come out in these plants. See, all the daffodils are now out in spring. We have the rotavator over there ready to do the new broad bean beds. Lots of frog spawn. Good healthy supply from last year. You can also see the baby fish, baby goldfish out here. And the bomb's coming on quite nicely. It's brought out rockery plants, and a lot of smaller seeds that I've planted are now just making a start. Anemones, some early wallflowers, and the benches I made the other week, and all of the perennials are now just making a start. Jokes coming up again, and some early marigolds. Strawberry plants in the greenhouse are all in flower. The vines are now doing well. One already has flowers. Lilies and wallflowers in the greenhouse too. But most spectacularly is the corner at the moment of the waterfall. with all of these look-ups to come up. And we have some early lettuce as well. Things are still progressing, but we have had trouble with mice and slugs. This is my stepson Patrick, and he's my head gardener. Patrick's now going to show you how we plant potatoes here in the raised beds, and he's going to move on to do the rest of the heavy work for me. So we're putting the potatoes in about 10 inches apart into a fairly deep trench, been well manured. Then we'll cover that over and then build up the next trench that we dig up on top of that to raise it even more, to give more room for the potatoes to grow inside. We've already got some leeks growing, as you can see, in that part there. But I should probably double plant in there and maybe put some sweet corn in there as well. He's also going to make me a whole new piece of veg garden in this new section we've just marked out. We're going to add to this section on there because we haven't got enough space for the broad beans. And now the toads and the frogs are starting to find their way around my little ponds and calling and breeding. A lovely big specimen here that grew from last year. And you see how in a matter of days, almost weeks, everything's coming out in the spring. All my plants that were planted before, all the work we've been doing, all makes sense. You can see now, in a matter of a week and a half, how my seedlings are all coming through that we planted up just that short time ago. And so the spring plants are gradually growing up in the greenhouse. And the first of the lilies coming out to flower as well. And there are just a few early wallflowers coming out in the garden as the buds start to come. Well, here we are on the 14th of May, so let's look at how the gardens are doing now as the spring and the seasons come on. The herb beds aren't doing too badly, that scathing cold wind, and now all the herbs are almost overtaking. And the main flower gardens are certainly coming on very well. We've had plenty of rain, and that's brought the plants out, which are now becoming far more established, as well as the existing trees I planted the last 2 years, now blossoming really well and promising fruit this year. Little French oak I put in 2 years ago, taking some time to establish, but it is doing well. Put in, such as the delphiniums and the hollyhocks, are all now really become far more established and are managing to show signs of being really good for painting this year. Even the climbing roses now beginning to form the archway that we're looking for the future. Both the artichoke beds are looking good. The main one down the veg garden is looking extremely good. It's done quite well this year. We've already had 2 harvests. We've got peas coming up at the back there, and the everlasting beet over there is doing well. And we've got spring onions So larger from last season and a new set coming through. Round flower bed by the cardfish, showing promise. Killer bed with the pergola. Also the perennial plants and the biennials are showing strength. Back of the garden a little bit drier, but I think we should still establish very well this year, and are certainly coming on strongly, as is the rockery area that we planted, which have all survived through winter and seem very happy. When you look at how this has now become established, and the rockery plants have certainly come on very strongly. The hop has just taken off at the beginning of this May. Here in front of my workshop, it's full of marigolds this year from the manure we put on, and the island with all the rain. It's now become far more established as grass for the summer. Ground artichoke and globe artichoke bed doing quite well. Put some marrows in there as well. And the soft fruit area, again, growing up very well. Strawberry plants flowering, those have all come through there. Broad beans here, just poking their heads through nicely. And we've got peas and other seeds coming through there. Potatoes in the raised beds are doing well again, and onions and leeks mixed here, and our horseradish at the end. Greenhouse now, we've got the tomato plants set, one or two melons just coming up. We had trouble with those with something eating them earlier on. The passion fruit is well set, with lots of flowers, whether it comes anything or something else. Lots of lettuce coming through from our early crops, and we've had 2 crops of strawberries already. So flowers on, and we think as long as they're pollinated we should have really good crops of grape this year. Nearly all the seedlings now are out and planted, and we're just using the beds now to plant into. Those plants now, the early spring ones, the forget-me-nots for instance, have gone through, now cleared those out. We're on to replanting for the summer season. Beautiful amount of yellow flag iris in our little pond this year. Little waterfall working, fountain, and the nectarine has 1 or 2 on it, and so does our peach. And so we're at the 10th of June, and it's been a funny old year. It's still been fairly cool here, but that's been quite good in the greenhouse as well. Anyway, this year we've got some beautiful foxgloves, as you can see. Lovely, very light cream poppies. Slight pinkish tinge, lovely white ones. And the lupins are just starting to come. Marigolds are already doing well, even though it's so early. We've got some nice iris about as well. think people also tend to forget some of our more common herbs and plants as being quite attractive. For instance, I'm using chives here to give these lovely little purple blossoms. This bed's this year, their first year of being established, and you see I've left some to grow tall now. Potatoes doing well, peas down there, and onions amongst them, some everlasting spinach in the background, and cabbage coming up, but the pigeons had a good go at that, and some turnips in the background with spring onions in the middle, and then beetroot and some sweet corn at this end. Really haven't got going this patch now. The grape is doing very well, lots of grapes. Down. The strawberries are about finished now, I'll cut them back soon. Plenty of salad going. Flower. Just wanted to get them back again. We've got salad sown amongst the tomatoes as well here. At the back of the tomatoes we've got mixed watermelons ready to grow up a string. The lilies have been rather lovely over the spring. Though with this strange mixture of weather we've had all the lilies fairly early. Still a few to come out, as you can see here with the white ones. And some nice little purple pinks coming. And the hostas. And the vines planted on the arches are just making a hold now. Here's some morning glory just coming out. Passion flowers doing as well. Is the Russian vine. And we have peaches on our peach tree. The vines coming up for the summer. On the other arch, on the right hand side of the greenhouse. And the pond is nicely established. Fish are enjoying it, keeping the insects out. Our nectarine has a few nectarines on as well. And the morning glory is coming out over this side too. It's getting established. At the back over there, our little line of 4 or 5 cucumbers, because actually that was plenty for us last year, though I had more around, we were wasting them. The beds as well, we have some more sweet peppers and some aubergines. The area is now coming into their own more. We've got plenty of manure now for this autumn as well. So we're always planning ahead. Big potato patch and some nice radish and more beetroot coming up there. Jerusalem and artichoke beds are doing okay. And the birds are enjoying our island now, which you see the grass has now really established itself on. But it's been a very grey and cool summer so far. Tables made from old bits of furniture, just cut through the grass, give us nice little alleyways through the trees and views. Planting new trees all the time every year. Another plum tree here getting established at the bottom of the orchard. It's quite difficult being so dry in this piece of orchard. This little holly tree is now becoming far more established, which is lovely. Interesting selection of plants here at the bird feeder, where the grain tends to grow up wild. We get some corn amongst all the marigolds and some of the other wildflowers I put into here. This pond's now really established. We've got these little wild trees growing on the sides that I don't mind. The iris have just come out into the pond. The lilies are just starting. And the beds each side of the waterfall and stream are now really doing well. We've got the marigolds now each side really taking hold for this summer. It's all little work and planning ahead, and it gives a very pleasant end result. Head to one side enjoying the views through the trees or hidden spaces. Perhaps just going to go and get the duck egg from the island. We're going to put it in the incubator. Grab it. Well done. Hello little chick. What are the rest of you doing? Coming out? Yeah?
The chick's hatching out. We've got a load of bantams. Look, now the brooder. A little drink of water first goes in just so it knows what it is, and then we'll see if the others are doing.
The brooder, they go into the ark here. Well, now we're coming into late summer. We're just starting to do the final harvest. The broad beans are a very good crop this year, as you can see. Beautiful broad beans in these. Nice big. And we should freeze all these up. That'll be a lovely meal. And even nice raw. Here we are, all those wonderful broad beans, a whole bowl full from that crop. Huge crops, that'll last us all the year and more. Well, our ducklings have now grown. They're rather fine specimens. We've got the call ducks and our nice white duck. Not quite a Jemima pup duck, but she's settled in, and the ducks are bringing in other wild ones. And the island, you see now, is established beautifully as well. So we're at the end of the season. Made them a nice new duck house. We're taking all the plants up, and it's the end of the year. Caterpillars had a good go at the cabbages, but we managed to get some nice plants out of them. Turnips look extremely good this year, and the sweet corn at the end of the season is now just coming to fruition, and hopefully before autumn we'll get a nice crop out of it. The rest of the garden, the brassicas haven't done too badly. We've got some nice sprouts coming around the garden as well. But the caterpillars did have a go while I was away in Scotland. Melons are now coming to fruition, and it's the very end of everything, not only in the greenhouse but in the garden. We've had wonderful crops this year, although the fruits have been very poor. Tomatoes have been just alright. We've had some very tasty tomatoes. In the greenhouse now, of course, with the weather going to get colder, everything will start to die down, but the lilies have really taken over. There's some nice chili peppers coming there as well now. This is always rather delightful at the end of the year. The cyclamen come up. We've got a couple of eggplants there, or aubergines, just fruiting as well. Cucumbers have been quite good this year. The grapes. Well, Claire, I hope you've enjoyed this film. We've come to the end of the series now. I think I've done as much in the garden as I'm going to do in the way of actually designing and making the whole new plan. All we're waiting for now is for the trees to continue growing and pruning and developing the little gardens we've got perhaps a little bit more, and getting the perennials to be more established. But otherwise, this section of my life has come to an end. Usually about every 6 to 7 years, a new stage. So I think the main structure of these gardens has been done, and I'm quite happy with the amount of work that's happened. I'm very grateful to Rosie and to Patrick especially, because he's the one that does most of the manual labour. I managed to go around on the tractor mower, but with my back and health problems, I couldn't manage all these gardens without him. He's now gone on to Agricultural College. He's still living at home here, but he's doing 2 years there, and then he's going on to do 1 year in catering. So this whole experience is very good for him as well, and learning more with me. So my brain's his brawn basically, but they'll become his brains as well. Alright, I do hope you've enjoyed all of this and seen how I've produced it, even with my limited resources, finances and health, and how you might get some ideas from it as well for your little